David Holgram has this from the website there called permacultureprinciples.com. If you search permaculture worldwide, that's the #1 URL. And there's his flower. And like I said, ours is similar, maybe not exactly the same words, for our tree. So this is building. I like to think about it as natural building, right? But we need to take care of shelter. Tools and technologies, I like to use the term appropriate technology. Education and culture, fine, fair enough. Health and spiritual well-being, we have holism. So I want to think about a more holistic thing. I think that is interesting, but that's a part of holism. There's more to it. Finances and economics, land tenure and community governments or stewardship. So land and nature stewardship. So these are things that help us to understand we have these responsibilities and we need to do them in a balanced way. If we do that, guided by our ethics and design principles, this is what we can say graphically representate of permaculture. Highly recommend, go online, Google images, permaculture flower. Lots of people have made graphics to describe their relationship to permaculture, and it can help you to get a good understanding. And just as well as some people like to have that written definition, others can have the definition in a picture. So if you like that, check it out. Google's got a lot. So understand how life systems work and interact is what this is trying to describe. Understand how harmony and life systems are achieved, right? Things need to be in balance. And understand that life is cooperative rather than competitive. So we need to know time and space relationships so that we put things in the right place at the right time. So David, in his website, so this is again from permacultureprinciples.com, took permaculture and kind of brought it to the modern age because we need infographics now. And he gave icons for each of the principles that we're going to go over. So now you have an iconization with the principle. So the first principle, observe and interact, and I'm sorry these are a little bit off, my PowerPoint skills aren't the best, but that's a tree. And if you zoomed in, that's a tree, and if we look really close, there's a hole, and there's a bird looking out of a hole in a tree. So what he's trying to do is tell us, look, if you observe trees, they're not just for wood. They also are habitat. They have multiple functions. They do more than just that one thing. Too many times we see the chicken, and all we see is the chicken breast. We don't see all the other things a chicken can do before it ever becomes meat. It has lots of functions in its life cycle that we can use as permaculturalists before its end of its life cycle. The next, catch and store energy, and we have a bottle. And on the label, he has a picture of the sun on a bottle. How can you get the sun to go into a bottle? How could you catch and store the sun's energy in a bottle? Well, we could use a battery, so we could capture solar energy and store it into a battery. What would be a more naturalized way of storing solar energy into, say, a bottle? What if I told you that that was a wine bottle? What if I told you it was a beer bottle? See, when they grow the grains or they grow the wine, that is capturing solar energy, but those are perishable. When I use the fermentation process to ferment it into the bottle, it becomes non-perishable and I can store it for time. This is what he's trying to help us to understand. Be very careful that you make yield that's perishable. You're not able to store it. So we want to think about capturing energy and storing it, and that's really appropriate if you live in a temperate climate where you can't get any food during the winter. So I need to capture food in the growing season and store it over time. Obtain a yield. There's a radish with a bite taken out of it. Well, very simply, you can't work on an empty stomach. So if you can't feed yourself, you can't do anything for anybody. So you must feed yourself first before you can do anything else for anyone else. You can't take care of your family if you don't have food. And if you can take care of yourself and your family, then you could do something else, say charitable, share surplus. So we must produce a surplus. Remember, it was an ethic of permaculture. You must produce surplus, because if you can't survive. Then you don't meet the definition of sustainability if you don't produce surplus. Self-regulation and accepting feedback. So picture the earth, right? And it's important to do that. I don't know that I necessarily currently agree with the internet and how people can go on and write whatever they want and there's no way to take it off. I think it's called slander most of the time, but hey, that's the future of the internet, morons writing whatever they want. But feedback is important, and what he's trying to tell us here is don't be a hermit. You need to interact with the larger community of permaculturalists. They're all out there. Like we're saying, go form after you leave. Where's your guild? Where are your people? In your local region is who you need to interact with first, then outside that. So first yourself, holistically, then your family, then your community, right? These are the things that he's asking. But remember, we have a network. Use and value renewable resources. There's a picture of a horse. How is a horse a renewable resource? Why would a horse be, if I'm a farmer, why would it be interesting to have a horse? What do horses do? Why did farmers have horses before? It could be transport. I could have a carriage. I could plow. And at the end of the horse's life cycle, what would happen? You could eat it if you were French, or sell it to the British for meat pies. But the horse can have offspring. The horse renews itself through breeding. So when this horse is done, I still have a horse. I don't have to keep buying a horse. This plant will die eventually, but I have its offspring. So I can always keep the plant. It's a renewable resource as long as I work to renew it. So that's why we can value a horse. Maybe don't need a tractor. We could utilize horses. Produce no waste. We have a picture of an earthworm. How can an earthworm help us to produce no waste? Yeah, they turn what some person might consider waste, your food scraps, into compost, manure from animals into compost, leaves, so things don't accumulate. So this is how nature produces no waste. It takes the output of one system, or in this instance, kingdom. So the tree leaf, the waste of the tree, comes down to be the input of the next system. So on our tree of life, we actually have two arrows, and it says, produce no waste, input to output. So always remembering that I go further than, don't even talk about waste. There's no such thing. Pollution is another one of these weird words. You just use it, but incorrectly. You can only measure pollution, yes, by parts per million. And then if I dilute anything, it's no longer a pollutant. In kingdom of nature, there's no pollutants, because what is a pollutant for one, or detrimental for one kingdom, is the food source for the other kingdom. Okay? So all we're having a problem with is accumulating something and not allowing it to be consumed by another kingdom. This is segregation, not pollution. We're segregating it from nature, thus saying it's a pollutant. If we were to put it back into the stream, it would be consumed by the other kingdom and become a resource for another kingdom. So nature has no waste. The forest creates no pollution. This is what we want to get into, a way of thinking. So when we make our design, we are taking all of our inputs and outputs and pushing them back through our system, and there's no waste stream that comes out. Yeah? That's just a business concept. That's like hoarding this certain thing, like a hoarder. I got all the newspaper. Well, now it's a pollutant or waste. But you could recycle the newspaper, and then it's not a pollutant. This is a question. So we have design from patterns to details. So this afternoon we'll be looking more in patterns, but it's a spider web. And what can a spider web help us with? Well, it's very efficient. The movement of the spider is super efficient. So imagine if we understand the efficiency and the pattern utilized by a spider, and maybe we made a garden. It would be very efficient to move things or resources within our garden. Our garden could be a spider web. These are type of things where we try to design from nature. Look at why nature may do something and see if we can learn from it to improve our designs. Integrate rather than segregate, and that's at least a graphical of a mandala. Okay? So in this instance, you may say that people were standing around the mandala. So we want to integrate, want to share, want to have like sister communities, if you will. It's more to share our experience of permaculture more than to try to fight the other person. And it's the same thing on our farm, within our own farm or within our communities. It's more about relationships that we have, the interrelationships, the interactiveness of those relationships that creates the resiliency of your design, right? More than segregation. Remember, when we segregate items, we produce waste. When we integrate items, there's no waste. Use small and slow solutions. We have a snail, it's moving really slow. I'd like to even think about this. You can have, you know the one, walk before you run. There's a great one from engineers. When engineers want to critique another engineer, to critique nicely, we say, hey, did you remember the KISS principle? K-I-S-S. Keep it simple, stupid. You're making it too complicated, right? It doesn't need to be that complicated. So we need to do small and slow solutions, walk before we run, keep it simple, stupid, and learn so that we don't fall down. If you fall down, you'll quit. How many times you fall on your face before you say, I don't want to do this anymore? So if you jump into permaculture, and run, boom, boom, 3 times out, and where do you go when you quit? Who you go back to? You go back to daddy, the man, your real daddy, the one that makes you stick your hand out to get that check. Yeah? Hey, that's who you go back to. So don't fall into that trap. Start small, learn, walk, and don't create systems to fail. Walk before you run. And I can tell you one thing for me, it helped me when we're first doing permaculture. I kind of jumped in from a big game of running really fast to this game, which is like, should be in snail's pace. But I wasn't. And I started to get disheartened because I wasn't meeting my goals. I wasn't meeting the schedules. I was pushing the people here too hard, okay? And I started to think about it. Well, what if I changed the way I thought about my goals? What if I thought about it in a multi-generational concept? What if I expanded my schedule to a longer period of time, not so tight? And then all I had to do was measure whether or not today, did Raktamachat get better? That's my only question. I don't really necessarily care how much. So I know one thing, in a non-physical manner, Raktamachat got better because you're learning, and you will go out and use that information. But also in a physical state, we can hear people are doing things outside, people are working in the gardens, people are doing things. Past student Alan is working in the permaponics to improve that system. And so how much does he do today? I don't know exactly. And I'm not overly worried about measuring that. But I know that we've moved forward today a little bit. And if we do that every day, and that compounds, right? It's an infinite future, right? How far can it go? And the other thing is, I know this plant grew today. And I knew all the other plants grow. So when you combine all that, I don't really need to measure it. I know that it moved forward, right? Then it's easy, and you don't set yourself up for believing you failed because you created some goal that's not realistic, okay? That's the beauty of permaculture, when you can say, oh, it's easy to be happy when you don't have something that creates failure. Almost all the time, when we look back on a situation in our lives that we felt bad about, 3 months later, 3 years later, you ask yourself why? Because it was irrelevant. Didn't make any difference to 3 years in the future. So use and value diversity. So there's a hummingbird. So a hummingbird, what do hummingbirds do? Why would it be nice to have a hummingbird here? I mean, I can remember the first time I saw a hummingbird at Raktamachat, because we started with nothing. And I saw it in the garden. I was like, wow, how did we get a hummingbird here? Like, it's not like you can go catch one and bring one. So we must have an ecosystem developing that can support that hummingbird. But what does it do? It's a pollinator. It goes and it pollinates my plants. So if I can provide the ecosystem, the habitat, the trees which it can live, it provides work by pollination. So it has a function within the system. So we want to use and value diversity, meaning the more diverse our system here, the less I have to do. The more interconnectedness there is, the less I have to do. The plants prune themselves. Yeah? This tree. So I set the design, I get it to its basically, and then I don't really have to do anything. And that's the definition of functional design. Raktamachat is functional when I no longer have to be here for it to run. Until that date, it is not a successful design and or business. As long as you have to work at your business, you're not the owner. You're an employee. So the functional nature is to get this to a place that other people can come, other people will join, and you create an ecosystem that's supportive of itself. And then it would need to be replicating, self-replicating, meaning someone says, I'm moving on, because maybe I move on. That person can fill my gap. And when they move on, someone else will fill their gap. Once that happens, then you become an ecosystem until itself, not based on the original person. This is the functional design that we're looking for, how you can create ecosystems that move on. Our modern universities are kind of like that. Teachers come, teachers go. The university is eternal. Use edges and value the marginal. Well, there's a windy path. And what that is want to do when we looked at edge, so we're going to learn all about edge or edge utilization in permaculture. When we have a straight line, or we have a curved line within the same distance, we can stack more elements on a curved line within the same point A to point B. Thus, we can achieve more yield. So in this instance, we want to use edges and we want to value marginal areas. A lot of the profit of Raktamachat, the actual profit, what makes us profitable, we get from our edge and our marginal areas. See, it's really easy to focus on that garden and think that that's where the profit is, and it isn't. Everybody can do that. What about all the food systems that are supported that aren't in that? What about the coconuts on the edge of the pond? What about the casuarina trees right behind the coconut that provides building materials, right? What about the bamboo line that allows Alan to go cut the bamboo to bring so that we can have sticky rice bamboo? These are edges, and they're in marginal locations. They're kind of on the peripheral. We don't go there much at all, but I get yield with doing nothing. Just had to plant it, and whenever I need a bamboo, I cut it down. And if I don't cut it down, guess what? It stays there. This is the kind of concept we want to look at, and this is only about how we look at something. So once you start to be told it, and we do it over a long period of time, it creates a pattern. And humans are really good at pattern recognition. So once you get that pattern, and we say it, and show it, and say it, and show it, and say it, and show it, boom, by the end of the class, you can't do anything but see the permaculture pattern. And guess what, guys? You can't go back. Once your eyes open, they're not going to close. You're not going to be able to turn it off. Rest of your life, get ready. So that brings us to the creatively use and respond to change. What does that mean? Permaculturalists push. We believe the climate is changing, but guess what, guys? It always has, and it always will. The only question is, what you gonna do? Well, what if I told you it was gonna get cooler instead of warmer? What's your response? What's your creativity? You wanna know what your design is limited by? You wanna know the limiting factor in your design? Your imagination. Your imagination is your limiting factor on your designs. The energy that hits this planet in 1 second of 1 day is infinite. All the energy that we've accumulated and used in the history of the human race, 28 million years, is only a second. So you've got the rest of your life to capture energy. What's Pichon doing? Going to get energy capture, boys and girls. Because the mushroom farm down the road, you know what they do? They grow mushrooms. Big farm. He takes all the spent mushroom casings, you know what he does? Throws them in a pile. They're waste. They're worthless. We can go there with that truck, as big as it is, and fill it up with compost for free. You understand? Their waste is our resource. We turn it into food. He says it has no value. Creatively use and respond to change, okay? We need to change the way we think about resources and waste. There's no such thing as waste. All waste is a resource, okay? It's just how we use it. And that's the only thing. So we're going to look at, and what do we farm here at Raktamachat? What do I farm? What am I a farmer of? The sun. Sun drives the energy patterns that we utilize, and we capture energy. People sometimes say, hey, where's your solar panels, Bo? I say, well, I don't really have too many solar panels because I get my energy from a hydro Okay, so I consider that to be renewable energy, and I'm happy to support the local economy. But man, I have a lot of solar panels. You're talking about what, ones made out of plastic and metal? I mean, you didn't see my 16,000 trees I planted? Every one being a solar collector? What do you think they do? They take in solar energy. You liked it when we were having the fire the other night. What were you watching? What was the release? It was the release of solar energy. You were looking at the sun. When you burn wood, that's just the sun. So that's what we do. We think about ways to create systems to capture solar energy, keep it in, and utilize it, stream it to a yield. So that's where you pick your yield. My yield here may be mangoes, right? We make really nice mangoes. So I can get that energy through composting, right? And I can get it to that tree at the right time, right? And it will give me an increased yield of mangoes, right? So the energy here goes to here, and that's my yield. That yield is marketable because people like the mangoes. So I can trade those into the market and village, and I can utilize that for things that I don't grow well. For instance, my soil, I can't grow avocados, guys. Avocados like sandy soil. So I just gotta grow none or really bad avocados. But I'm lucky, we have really good clay. So I grow some world-class mangoes. So I can trade mangoes for avocados all day long. Okay? I trade the mango, I have money, I can buy avocado. I don't have to grow everything. Okay? And this is just this way of thinking about permaculture.